The musical genius Tom Wiggins was born in 1850, into a world that saw him as property rather than prodigy. His parents, Charity and Domingo Wiggins, were enslaved Africans, likely brought to Georgia through the brutal domestic slave trade. Stripped of their homeland, their names, and their freedoms, they were forced to build a life under oppression. But in the midst of this cruelty, they gave birth to something extraordinary, a child unlike any other. Tom was born blind. In a society that valued enslaved people only for their labor, this meant he was seen as useless, a burden. He couldn't pick cotton, couldn't plow fields. But while he lacked sight, he possessed something far more powerful, an ear that could capture the world in perfect harmony. As a child, Tom didn't just hear the rain, he played it. After a torrential downpour, he climbed onto a piano and, without a single lesson, replicated the exact sound of the storm, the rolling thunder, the dripping water, the chaotic yet mesmerizing rhythm of nature itself. He could hear, and then flawlessly recreate the world around him. Every note, every sound, every symphony of life. As word of Tom's miraculous talent spread, his enslavers saw something beyond his music. In a world where enslaved people were treated as commodities, Tom became more than just property. He became an investment, a spectacle, a money-making machine. His owner, General James Bethune, saw an opportunity, and at just 8 years old, Tom Wiggins was put on display. Tom was paraded through the drawing rooms of the Southern elite, his tiny fingers astonishing audiences as he flawlessly played back complex compositions after a single hearing. He could mimic not just the music, but the emotion, the technique, down to the smallest flourish. His performances were unlike anything seen before, a child who could speak through sound, despite never being taught to read or write. By the 1860s, Tom was no longer just an oddity in private homes, he was a national sensation. In 1860, he was brought to Washington, D.C., where he performed for some of the most powerful men in America. Among them was Senator Stephen Douglas, the famed politician who had debated Abraham Lincoln just 2 years earlier. Douglas, an advocate for states' rights and a defender of slavery, listened in amazement as the young, blind, enslaved boy played before him. Tom had no say in where he played, who he entertained, or what price was placed on his talent. He was earning thousands, more than most free men of his time, but not a cent belonged to him. The more he played, the richer his owners became, and the deeper the chains of exploitation tightened around him. In the height of his fame, Blind Tom Wiggins was a household name, a musical prodigy who stunned audiences across America and Europe. But as the decades passed and the world changed, his music, once seen as a miracle, began to fade into history. The Civil War, the Emancipation Proclamation, and the ratification of the 13th Amendment reshaped the country, but for Tom, freedom remained an illusion. During the Civil War, Tom composed one of his most famous works, the Battle of Manassas, a chaotic, thunderous piece that captured the fury of war. Inspired by the first major battle of the conflict in 1861, the composition mimicked the sounds of marching troops, cannon fire, and the raw, unrelenting terror of battle. Yet, despite his music chronicling history, Tom himself remained trapped in the past, a man whose genius was owned, controlled, and exploited, long after slavery had been abolished. With the end of the war and the passage of the 13th Amendment in 1865, slavery was legally abolished. But Tom was not granted the life of a free man. Instead, his custody was fought over like a prize in a courtroom battle. His former owner, General James Bethune, had died, and control of Tom passed to Bethune's son, John Bethune, who embarked on an extended tour of the U.S., continuing to profit from Tom's abilities. 4 years, Tom was shuffled between guardians, none of whom saw him as anything more than a source of income. While the world moved forward, jazz and blues emerging from the soul of Black America, Tom remained a relic of another time, a forgotten virtuoso lost in a changing musical landscape. The classical world, too, had taken notice of Tom's unparalleled abilities. The famed Austrian pianist and composer Ignaz Moscheles wrote of Tom's extraordinary faculties, and Charles Halley, the renowned British pianist and conductor, was equally stunned by his talent. Yet, despite such high praise, Tom's reputation never translated into lasting respect. He was seen as an oddity rather than a genius, his legacy buried under the weight of racial and historical prejudice. In his later years, Tom lived in relative obscurity in New York City and New Jersey, under the care of Eliza Stutzbach, the widow of John Bethune. No longer a spectacle, no longer a profit-making machine, he lived out his days playing for himself rather than for an audience. And then, in April of 1908, the music finally stopped. Tom Wiggins suffered a stroke and passed away at the age of 59. A life that had once been filled with standing ovations ended in quiet anonymity. Tom Wiggins was more than just a child prodigy, more than a spectacle for the wealthy elite. He was a musical phenomenon, a man who overcame every limitation placed upon him except the one he could not escape, the world's refusal to see him as an equal. His name belongs alongside the greats such as Beethoven, Chopin, and Liszt. His compositions, from the thunderous energy of the Battle of Manassas to the breathtaking realism of the rainstorm, prove that he wasn't just a virtuoso, he was a composer of rare genius, an innovator who pushed the boundaries of what music could be. Some historians believe that if Tom had been born a century later, his fame might have rivaled that of Michael Jackson. Another child prodigy who, like Tom, dazzled audiences from an early age and redefined the very sound of his era. Tom Wiggins may have been one of the first, but he was far from the last. His spirit lives on in every blind musician who refused to be defined by their limitations. Ray Charles, whose voice shaped an entire genre, Stevie Wonder, whose mastery of sound transcended generations, Moondog, the blind Viking of 6th Avenue, composing symphonies on street corners, Ross on Roland Kirk, whose music defied convention, Teddy Pendergrass and Curtis Mayfield, who turned tragedy into triumph, proving that true artistry cannot be silenced. Though Tom Wiggins' name faded from public memory, his legacy never truly disappeared. His influence rippled through time, resurfacing in unexpected ways. In 2001, music icon Elton John paid tribute to him with the Ballad of Blind Tom, immortalizing his story in song. And for those who seek to understand his genius, his original sheet music remains preserved at the Columbus State University archives, a tangible piece of history, waiting to be rediscovered. Though few recordings of his music exist, his compositions continue to inspire musicians and historians alike. Each note, each phrase he left behind is a reminder that brilliance cannot be contained, and that true genius, no matter how long buried, always finds its way back into the light. His story isn't just history, it's a lesson, a reminder of the voices that have been lost but not silenced. If you've never heard the music of Blind Tom Wiggins, now is the time. Explore his compositions, share his legacy, and ask yourself what other forgotten geniuses are waiting to be heard. Thank you for watching another Fresh K documentary. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button, subscribe, and let us know in the comments where Blind Tom Wiggins sits among music's greats.